Well, looks like we've got a good bunch appearing already.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Raina?
I'm fine, thank you. Beautiful day.
Got Morses Pond as the background.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for hosting this today.
That's okay. I'm recording it as well, so I can post it and people can.
Oh, that's really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good benefit.
Yeah.
And we can publicize it a little bit too, if you like.
Yeah. 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 I suppose I didn't really think of doing it as doing some Zoom meetings for Friends of Morses Pond because it's much easier than trying to organize rooms and stuff like that. If you could, you know.
I do find myself missing the live in person lately, though.
Yeah, I do. Actually, one of the funny things is that the wetlands meetings go so much faster there.
Hi, Dee. Hello.
Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Yeah. I've sort of changed the whole way they get run now. So basically, people just don't get on until they've got all their ducks in a row because we just can't get into endless discussions because we don't have the time. You know, it's
something to take with us into the new world.
Oh yeah, whenever it comes back. Yeah.
I feel like it might. The numbers are looking pretty good, and we all just have to keep doing all the things they tell us to do.
Yeah, it's not really going to come back until get a good vaccine now, because it's the only way you can get the herd immunity numbers to actually get back to reasonable normal. But it's the new normal.
2022, the new normal.
Yeah. So it's I'm planning to go up to Canada on Friday. Taking our son up to university, and at the moment I'm trying to fill out all the paperwork. You have to when you go there you have to basically quarantine for 14 days, and so we're waiting for the university to come back to where he's quarantining. And, so you have to.
Do they want you in Canada?
I think I have no choice because we're Canadian. Yeah.
So 2 weeks of quarantine, or could you just produce a negative test result?
No, they're not accepting that. They're just saying quarantine. That's it. 14 days.
Really?
And they want to know where you are for all 14 days. You have to stay there because they want to be able to contact you at any time to find out how you're doing and that you are quarantining. So he'll quarantine for 14 days, but still be doing. He started university from home on the computer, and then when he'll be working out of a hotel room probably for 14 days. I'm going to probably sneak into his hotel room for one night and then come back. and fortunately, I think it's easier to come back into the US than there is to going to Canada. I've got some more people. I've got to let them into the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Well, good luck.
Well, thank you.
A few more people are coming. Let's see.
Yeah.
We've got 15 people so far. That's great.
Yeah, it's
Hello.
Hi.
Afternoon. Hello, everybody.
That's great. So what I'd like to do actually, before we start the meeting, the usual protocol with meeting is to turn your microphone off, and then basically wave your hand or send me a signal or something like that if you want to come back on. But I'll try and run it so people get a chance to talk. And this is sort of, it's not really an official meeting, so there's none of the usual tie-ups about communicating with each other. It's basically just a matter of making it work with so many people. It's just basically flag me and I'll give you a chance to speak. I'm also recording the whole thing, so once it's recorded, I'll post it on the internet and then people can share it with anybody else who wants to be. So with that, I see you got Brandon's here, and I think we've got Ken actually. He's stuck behind the little screen here. Hi, Ken.
Howdy. That's Morses Pond behind me if you didn't recognize it.
Well, that is the real Morses Pond. I think the mountains in your Morses Pond mean that you're obviously looking at it from the Natick side.
I think we have dueling Morses ponds now.
It's like Brandon's got the real one. Yeah.
Yeah. So one's a foggy one. Brandon's a not foggy one. I think Matt's got a sunny one.
I have a picture of Morses Pond.
All right.
There you go. Yeah.
At the weeds.
Okay. Right. Okay. I think we've probably got as many people as we're going to get. So really what I got the meeting together because I had quite a few people on the Friends of Morses Pond who were interested in the weed situation. It's been a really weird really weird year for weather and rainfall, and that's affected the weed growth. I think we've had blue-green algae in some areas, which we haven't really been troubled with for a while. Again, which I think is the weather conditions as much as anything. And there was a lot of comments about, oh, can we do something this year with the weed and stuff like that? And I spoke to Brandon, and Brandon spoke to Ken, and really, I think the best thing to do is, I think this year we're past the point where we can do very much, but I think Brandon suggested we get Ken in and we have a chat about the pond, and people who got issues about the pond can voice them, and we've got the experts here, and we can see what we can do for next year. So I think with that, I'll mute myself and I'll pass over to Ken, and Ken can give us.
Actually, Brandon's going to start us off.
Okay, I'll pass over to Brandon.
Okay, thank you. Now my mouse is not working. All right. There we go. All right, so, well, thank you. Actually, Richard, it looks like I am not able to share my screen. Are you able to allow that? Okay, come on.
Yeah, I'll do that when I.
Richard, you've muted yourself if you're not aware of it.
Haven't missed much.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right, well, first off, thank you so much for having us. I hope everybody's doing well and taking care of yourself and enjoying this weather we're having right now. It's beautiful out. I just wanted to kind of briefly talk about some of the other projects that are going on at Morses Pond before passing it over to Ken, and happy to answer any of those questions either offline, feel free to email. But I'm Brandon Schmidt, I'm the director of the Natural Resources Commission. Just to kind of put everything in context, I wanted to throw up the open space map in Wellesley. And I'm doing this partially to just kind of recognize that Morses Pond is a special place, but it is one of a part of a park system that all these areas have different needs, have different challenges, and different expenses associated with them. I put up some numbers here. From our GIS, the Morses Pond parcels are 3 million square feet out of a total of roughly 23 million square feet, or 14% of the total land area under the NRC's jurisdiction is Morses Pond. However, 35% of our total operating budget, and I'm sorry about, or you're welcome for the noise in the background. But just, there is an effort, a clear effort to improve conditions at Morses Pond. And Ken can go into kind of the challenges, and you all have seen the challenges, you live with the challenges, but just wanted to put that into context. Thanks. So one of the projects I just wanted to briefly touch on that you hopefully have seen some progress on is the Morses Pond remediation project. So the DPW started this in earnest right before COVID hit. They made a lot of progress. They put in a bioswale that's kind of hard to tell. They need to go back and replant along the right side of that fence there you see on the picture on the left. An Eagle Scout project put in the little stairs right there. This is right as you enter the beach area on the right, the first site. Again, it needs some vegetation on either side, but there's progress being made there. There was some progress along the aqueduct. I understand from a conversation that one of the sites that they went to and put down some erosion controls doesn't look that great and needs to be revisited. So they are planning on doing that, and will hopefully do that in the next couple months when they're able to do it, and as they're able to do it with the weather. We do have in our capital plan next year for fiscal year 2020, that means funds would be available not until July 1st, but we do have $315,000 in our capital plan for a new large harvester. This picture is not representative necessarily of what we would buy, but it was a shiny new harvester picture that I found. So that has gone through 5 years of the capital plan, but you know, we can talk more about budgeting, but it will need support, vocal support. So when that comes up, you know, I do encourage the residents to contact your local town meeting members and let them know how important this piece of equipment is, because despite being, you know, one of the many pieces of equipment that the town owns, you know, I think people don't really understand what it does, why it's critical to the management program, and might be seen as expendable. So just putting a plug in there that if this is important, make sure your voice is heard on that. The final thing that I'll mention is this is still in draft form, but hopefully you all either attended or learned about the feasibility study for the master plan at the beach areas that the Recreation Commission has taken this on, working with a consultant to kind of look at the design at the beach to enhance the experience there, make it more functional, make it accessible, and adding some additional features. So this plan is being drafted right now. They're in kind of the final draft form of that after several public forums, and they'll have that available. We'll put it on our website as well. And I'll mention that about the other projects that I mentioned. The erosion study is also available online if you all want to take a look at it. So that's really, I just wanted to kind of briefly tell you what's going on coming down the pike. And if there are any questions or comments, please email me or call me, at the office, and I'm happy to discuss any of those. And of course, if there are any questions right now, I'm happy to try to answer them as well.
Well, thanks very much, Brandon. I really appreciate the overview there. Say about mentioning to the town meeting members about the new harvester. Is there a sort of, you know, is there pushback against it, or is it just something that we can do to help any other way we can help?
I just think given our current financial situation and uncertainty about next year, this year, all town departments were asked to reduce their capital budget by 15%, and we were able to do that. Next year, we may be asked to do that or more. And so I just think it's recognizing that the price of this equipment is not going to drop 15%. So some other program is going to be impacted if this is fully funded. And so I think that's just, we want to know that. And I think town meeting will want to hear that. But as I said, this is not a new request. It's been in the 5-year capital plan. I didn't mention, but there is also funding in our 5-year plan for Morses Pond erosion improvements. I think those will likely be we won't need the full request because that was funded by the CPC the first year, and we haven't used all that money, but we may need more to complete all of the permitted sites. So no, I'll say, to answer your question, I have not heard any pushback, but it is something that it seems, based on previous discussions, that, oh, can't we get a few more years out of the piece of equipment? And I think at this point, the answer is no. This thing is not reliable, and it's not performing the way that we need it to.
Well, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? With the new harvester, is that it's getting to the point where it's a false economy to keep trying to keep the old one going, because we're actually not getting the service, and it's costing money.
Yeah, just give you a little bit of background. If you talk to the companies that make the harvesters, they'll tell you should replace it every 10 years. Of course, they're selling harvesters. Most of us in the field and know groups who own a harvester would tell you that you could get 20 years out of one if you stay on top of the maintenance and are very careful. Of course, that's a harvester that's used just in one lake, usually by somebody who knows the details of it intimately, often a contractor. It's a little trickier when it's a town. That particular large harvester does not move lake to lake, but it does not stay on the lake. It goes to a yard in the winter. It is not particularly covered or protected. The barge is subject to erosion, to corrosion and things. So there are other issues that go with it. I guess the town probably has it right. They like to see 15 years out of a piece of equipment. So that was kind of where they settled on it. The problem is that as it gets to the end of its life, you spend more money fixing it and more time fixing it. I don't think the repairs have been excessively expensive, but they are time consuming. A few years back, we went through a process where we looked very carefully at all the things we thought that could go wrong. We actually had a representative of the company come out and go through it all with this, fine-tooth comb routine. And the town bought all the parts they thought they would need to fix things quickly. And then immediately the next year, something broke that we never anticipated. It was something with the hydraulics. It's just, that's the way it is. And it's very difficult to keep up with that. The latest issue, and it really plays into what happened this year, and I'll show you graphics on it a little bit, but the actual conveyor system loses power over time, and it develops friction, such that they can only bring in about half the size of a load that we used to bring in when it was new. And I experienced this myself. I went out with a new guy harvesting to show him what plants were what and how the tricks that I know in terms of most efficient operation. And we got about 2/3 of the way through a load, and he got a call to come back to the ramp. And I said, that's okay, we've covered things. We can take this partial load in. When we got in, we went to unload it, and we struggled. And he said, I don't know, is it too much? I said, I don't think so. You're not anywhere near the full level. And Mark Patnaud, who's kind of the master of that sort of stuff, came in and said, oh no, you're overloaded. I said, really? He goes, yeah, you can't do what we used to do with this thing. And he had to get on and actually unload some of it in shallow water down by the outlet, dump the rest of it, then pick up the other stuff again and dump it again. So this is what we're faced with right now. This is the equivalent of cutting a whole bunch of football fields with a small push mower. If it breaks and you're down for a week, you never catch up. So that's the problem.
May I ask a question? It's Thomas. Am I heard?
Yes.
Okay. Is there some kind of easy to erect structure that would cover this thing if perhaps we left it maybe in the yard or over near where they are parked now, to preserve
my opinion is it ought to get parked in a fenced area, in temporary fenced area in the corner of the beach thing and covered with a simple tarp. It wouldn't be that big a deal. However, to maintain it, it has to go somewhere else. And then to get taken there, it has to have a police escort because it's too wide to travel on the roads as is. So you're thinking along the right lines. It has not worked out as such. It's still worth discussing, but I don't have an easy answer for you. Even when they take it back to the yard, if they would just put a giant tarp over it, it would help. but it's still out exposed to the elements, the temperature changes and everything else.
I have a question for Brandon. Hi, it's Greg. Brandon, first of all, thank you so much, and Ken too, for being responsive. Anytime I've called up and had a question, you guys get right back to us. So really appreciate that. My question has to do with how decisions are made about what parts of the pond get harvested. Do we have any?
That's really my area.
Oh, okay.
It would be better if I just went into my little part about review of the harvesting program, if that will help.
Sure.
And that will get explained.
Yep.
Right, so I can share a screen, and I can, that's good.
Yeah, you can. So I suggest everybody wait to the end of Ken's talk, and then keep your questions. And if you've got a burning question, you can always use the chat function.
Okay. I'm going to go a little out of order just because the first part's shorter and easier, and I don't expect anybody has too many questions on this. This is the one graphic that tells the whole story of our management of the water quality in the pond. There's more to know, but this is pretty straightforward. Prior to the time when we were doing any management, the orange dots are your Secchi clarity, and the blue diamonds are the phosphorus levels. You would like the phosphorus level to be less than 0.02 milligrams per liter, preferably down around 0.01. As you can see, we were rarely ever there. You would like the clarity to be more than 3 meters. You can see we were hardly ever there. This is a summer average. Certainly at times it went up and down. We did the program starting in 2008. You can see we got up around the 3 meter mark pretty quickly and knocked the phosphorus down reasonably well. We went another 3 years where the chemicals were eating the equipment, causing some problems. So we kind of regrouped, figured it all out, changed the chemical, changed the system a little bit. As you can see, for the last 7 years, we've had just great conditions overall. We were pushing the limit this year and last year. We used less aluminum, and we had really warm summers. So that's about as stretched as we can get. We could have done more with it. The problem this year was, if you recall, we didn't have hardly any rain in June. It wasn't until the very end of the month. And we depend upon rain to be the trigger to distribute the chemical. So we went almost the entire month of June without putting any out. And then we had a burst at the end of the month, and then we kept going through July. So we kept up with it, but we really had a month where the pond was cooking and we weren't doing anything to control the phosphorus levels that came in May. So that's why we wound up where we did. But again, the target being start the summer somewhere near 0.01, get through the summer somewhere by 0.02, and this is an average being shown, not bad. And the clarity, again, we stayed above 3 meters the whole way. The measurements that went into this, I just put this point in before the call, were 3.4, 3.4, 3.2, 3.1, and 3.1 meters. So yeah, like 5 measurements, and they were all 3 to 3.5 meters, which is 11 to 13 feet. Not bad. Not great, considering we've had like the first year, well, the third year doing this, but the first year that we automated it, 2016, we just fantastic. Because now the system runs on its own. Nobody has to turn it on. I can run it off the cell phone. I mean, everything about this is working well, except that, yes, there's maintenance and issues with that. We have to replace the controller. This year, we're going to have to move the precipitation station because they're tearing down the building that we have it mounted on. There's always something going on, but we've managed to handle this. We did have some blue-green algae showing up this year, little patches. It was popping up off the bottom. And a lot of that relates to the fact that it was just so hot and you had low oxygen in the bottom of the lake, but enough light penetrating because we've kept it clear enough that the algae could grow and pop up. It wasn't bad. There was some in the water column that you wouldn't see that I would get from a plankton sample, never even close to enough to post a warning or to be of concern. So we made it through. But yeah, you could see the clumps once in a while popping up. But again, that's the fact that we kept the phosphorus down, we kept the clarity up. It worked. I'd like to see us get a little more aluminum in there than we have in the last 2 years. Part of that is we've been diverting some of the aluminum to 5 smaller ponds in town to try to clean them up as well. We can certainly just order more aluminum and do it that way, but we've been trying to work within a budget, and this has worked pretty well. So the water quality end, hopefully nobody has any complaints because it's looked good, it's met the targets, and other than some of these really bright clumps that were noted in a couple places, like mid to late August, we were okay. And again, those were not enough to be of a concern to anybody. All right, if there aren't any burning questions on that, I will go into the harvesting because I realize that is where everybody has the greatest concerns, and logically so. Okay, two graphics that are showing here side by side. The one on the left is just the averages for all the areas of the lake. The one on the right are the areas of the pond. I'm not showing a map of it to answer Greg's question. You know, there's 7 zones that we have laid out. Zone 1 is the northern end beyond the islands, where there's a few homes on the west side, but it's pretty much all giant swamp at this point. Has been for, we did a little dredging there to get some open water and some detention, but this is not a target area for harvesting other than creating a channel for the people that live on the west side. And we've had a complaint up there and somebody felt we should do more, and that's worth discussing, but that isn't part of the plan at the moment. Area 2 is the northwest cove, small cove on the west side, just before the islands. Area 3 is the main central zone to the north below the islands, going across the lake from west to east. And then Area 4 is the northeast cove, the slightly bigger cove with more homes on it, and the aqueduct goes by there. So 2, 3, and 4 are definite targets of harvesting. Area 5 is the portion of the giant cove on the west side across from the beach that's in Natick. We don't harvest that part because it's in Natick and there are no homes on it. Everything that has, we draw the line, even though it may not be exactly coincident with the town border, from the last home on the south side to the last home on the north side, and everything gets harvested to the east of that. Area 6 is that area I just described, everything from the Natick line more or less out to where the water gets deep, which is then directly across from the beach. And Area 7 is just sort of the peripheral area, mostly around, the only shallow zone is right around the beach and going up the north side of the lake where there's the walking trails up to where the cove that Area 4 is. So there is a shallow swath there, but most of this area is pretty deep. What you're seeing in the graphic is this biomass rating where we go from 0 to 4. Sounds fancy. All it is 0 is no plants. A 1 means 25% of the water column is filled. A 2 means half the water column. A 3 means 3/4, and a 4 means it's top to bottom. And of course, you've seen top to bottom, that's a 4. We've seen 3s where it's 3/4 filled, that's not good. 2 is pretty nice. It means there's enough plants for habitat, but usually they're not all over the surface. It's really the bottom half because it's been mowed, and that works out pretty well. So that's our target. That's the green line. We'd like to see the targeted areas of the lake, 2, 3, 4, and 6, achieve a rating of 2 on average. Doesn't mean every last spot will be. The harvester cannot work in less than 2 foot of water, usually not less than 3. So there's going to be patches around the edge. There'll be areas where it's water lilies that pop up, and unless they're dense, we don't cut them. There'll be areas of native pond weeds that we try to avoid. We're mostly hitting the invasive species, the 2 milfoils and the water chestnut, but that gets dealt with otherwise, fanwort. So when you look at what happened this year for the overall amalgam, prior to the start of harvesting, we were already registering about a 2.7, 2.75. It's way too high. Plants grew fast and early this year. We had a wimpy winter. The last one like that was 2016, when we also had a tough year. So the plants were already cranking by the time we got out there and checked them. And this was in May 21st. The first day of harvesting wasn't until June 1. Not ideal, but they got the big harvester out and found out there was a leak in the barge. It couldn't float. It had to go back and get repaired. They brought the small harvester out and started working with that, but that's just not big enough to do most of this. The end of the first cut, the red bar, we're just short of making our goal. If you go over to the graph on the right, Area 2 made it. Area 3 almost made it. Area 4 pretty clearly didn't make it, and Area 6 didn't make it. So on average, it looks close to okay, but the reality is, depending upon where you lived, it might not have looked so good. And again, this is a combination of the plants getting an early start and the harvester getting a late start. It's that simple. I wish we could get the harvester out there sooner. I wish we could control the weather so the plants wouldn't get that early start. Neither of those is within my power, and although they have tried, it's pretty hard to put it within anybody's power. The unharvested area you can see is bad start to finish. If nothing else, realize that conditions are much improved having the harvesting we had than if we didn't have it at all. Is it ideal? No. Do we meet our goals this year? I'd have to say no. In fact, we look at the second cutting was the same deal. I think, yeah, here's, this is after the first cut, so you see what's what. Did I get a second cut one in there? No. The second cut was much like the first cut. A few areas were close to making it, but most did not. And it's really bad right now because the fan wort's really taken off. Now, the weather factor, no control, but we look at the harvesting itself, and these guys keep daily logs, and I get real data. I'm all about the data. And I just finished this analysis before the call. Here's the total hours spent cutting in each year going back to the beginning of the program. Unfortunately, records weren't kept in 2008. I don't even remember why now, but you can see it goes up and down. Bottom line is 2020 was pretty normal. I mean, it's about the average number of hours that gets spent. Now, I mentioned like we've just about made our goals in the first cut, but the truth is the first cut's supposed to be done before 4th of July. It wasn't done till the 10th of July. So we're actually a week late. If I had just made the cut off the end of June, it would have looked worse than it was because this guy's worked really hard through the holiday and for the next week to catch up. But okay, bottom line is they did put in pretty close to average and certainly a substantial number of hours in 2020. But if you look at the weight that was harvested, and this really tells the tale, we've been going down since 2015. 2012 and 2013 are probably not the best years to look at because that's when we did harvest Area 1 at the north end to get ready for dredging. We didn't want the plants interfering with the dredging. So there was a lot of harvesting in 2012 and some more in 2013 that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. But if you look at 14 on, now it'll bump up there in 2015, but it's been a steady decline. Yet the number of hours, you go back again, really not that different. I mean, if anything, it's more than we've done any year other than 2019 going back to 2016. Pretty similar from 2014 on, yet we've got less plants being harvested. Like, okay, what's going on with that? And the one thing I found, and this is where it really stands out, weight of plants per load delivered. Every load is less. We are literally at less than half the biomass per load right now than we were 5 years ago. Now, some of that is guys doing half loads and getting called back for other duties. Keep in mind, you got COVID-19 going on. They were down 5 staff positions this year. We had 3 major storms that dropped trees all over. These are the same people. I mentioned trying to cut the football fields with a push mower. Those same guys are responsible for fertilizing the field, raking the leaves, sweeping the parking lot. They've got to do it all, and there aren't enough of them. So the hours, even though they did get devoted this year, a lot of it was weekends, it was long days. A lot of them showed 10-hour days with 7 hours of cutting time. That's pretty impressive. Unfortunately, there weren't enough of them. There just weren't enough of them to keep up. So we're not pulling out the loads. This is partly operator issues with being interrupted or having to do other things, but it's also a function of the actual harvester, which cannot transport and offload the same amount it used to be able to do. So that's the basic rundown of where we are in the harvesting. I also have information, I don't have it turned into a graphic or anything, of how many days were spent in each area. If I go back up, again, I probably should have the map up here and I don't. You know, Area 1, again, is the north end. We don't do much there. 1 day was spent there. Area 2 is the northwest cove. they spent 10 days there this summer. Area 3, which is that mid-zone out in the public, they spent 23 days there. Area 4, which is the northeast cove, they spent 12 days there. So Area 3, and then Area 6, which is also a big public area, that got 16 days. So between Area 6 and Area 3, which are the big public areas, there's some people living on both of those, but it really is open area where people boat or whatever else. That got 39 days. The two coves, 2 and 4, which are mostly used by the people that live there, got 22 days. So that's a reasonable apportionment. If anything, they probably spent more time in the coves this year because with the beach not having its normal operation, we thought we could get away with less time in Area 6. Area 6 is where all the plants float over to the beach, and we usually have to stay on top of that. We let it go a little this year and spent more time in the coves, and admittedly, it still wasn't enough. All I can say is they tried. I think these guys worked pretty darn hard, and it didn't work out. And there's just shortages of manpower, limitations on the equipment.
May I ask a question about your
harvest? If you're trying to use a harvester as opposed to a drawdown or herbicides, neither of which are acceptable in this case, this is the problem you face. There's going to be good years and bad years, and it's going to depend on the weather, the manpower, and the equipment. And all three combined to make this a really tough year.
Ken?
Yes.
I see the post first cut and post second cut for 2020. Do you have any theory about why Area 2 jumped up so much relative to its post first cut compared to 3, 4?
It's partly timing of the survey. When I did the first cut survey, they had just finished in Area 2. When I did the second cut survey, they had not been back to Area 2 in like 2 weeks. And it had all grown in pretty dense. The fanwort just comes up. Area 4, on the other hand, had been cut in both cases not all that long before it, and it still was over the limit. The plants just grew like crazy this year, and the fanwort was the primary culprit. So some of this is timing. You know, if I was out there doing this every week, we might have a slightly different impression. But that's why I tend to look at the average overall. Right. You know, how are we doing? And the answer is not too bad, but not quite in the first cut, and nowhere near where we should have been on the second cut. But again, I noticed we had those big storms. There was one point where they were, I mean, I'm looking at the dates in front of me of when they harvested. August, there was a space from the 21st to the beginning of September where there was no cutting. It's an entire 9 days. Nobody was out there.
Good to know. I didn't want to.
We went from the 11th to the 18th with no cutting. So no wonder this one looks like this. On the other hand, this one, which was actually done on July 10th, I believe, after they achieved their second cut was done, it really should have been like the 1st of July, 10 days earlier. You know, they cut in June, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 9, 10, 11. There was a burst there because they had the shore conveyor broke and was down. So 18, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30. So I mean, they stacked up the days at the end of June, and then July 1, 2, and then so on. So they did a lot in a burst. And if I happen to do the survey after that, it looks better than maybe it was a week before.
Yeah.
They just couldn't keep up this year. Something to keep in mind too is this figures into questions and complaints we had. The overall plan maximizes the benefit to the general public, which means Area 6 and Area 3 generally have priority. Areas 2 and 4, which are coves with a lot of private residences, and Area 1, where it's just one side, don't get a lot of priority. Now, they got more this year than usual, and it still wasn't good enough. And in a good year, we can do it all. But when we have to cut back, we have a real issue. 6 and 3 are getting the attention because that's where most of the public is going. I wish it was different. I wish we had more manpower and a better harvester. But when you have to make those decisions, that's how they're made.
Ken, couple of comments. First of all, this is great data. It's fantastic that you collect this. It's incredibly helpful and useful on all counts. I appreciate the general guiding principle of public use, you know, benefiting everybody. My question has to do with Area 7 and Area 6. Area 7, it looks to me like the data is a little bit misleading. It's a big area. It's it includes the town beach, and that area has great data in terms of the chart.
It's
But
deep. It's deeper.
it's misleading. Pardon me?
It's deeper. The graph will include Area 7.
Well, what I was going to say is it's misleading
because it's just not relevant.
The south.
We're here because it does have monitoring points in it, and they do a little bit of harvesting. But yeah, it isn't a relevant area because most of it's too deep to have serious plant issues.
Well, I'm just going to say that the southeast corner, which is included in Area 7, is covered with milfoil and fanwort, covered. And I only saw one pass early in the season in the harvester.
Southeast corner or southwest corner?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Southwest corner.
Yeah, it was bad. I agree with you. Yeah, and you're right. It's misleading because you're seeing a mix of points, not just the shallow areas. Yes.
Yeah. So if there's any way to address that in the future.
On that, you were correct. Only one day was spent harvesting in Area 7. Yep. Yeah.
And the other comment I wanted to make is I really appreciate what you said about Area 6. I don't live in Area 6, but I'm glad attention is being given there because I could see that it's full of milfoil and fanwort, you know, not everywhere, but in lots of places there. So I think that's good to be putting a fair amount of effort into there.
Yeah, the other areas needed too. I mean, 2 and 4, if they get weedy, you just can't use them. You just can't get out. Nobody can swim. And we completely get that we need to try to keep that open. It just wasn't in the cards. And we've struggled for a few years because of the equipment limitations. Now, if we had more manpower, they could have both harvesters working at once. We've done that at times, not this year.
Ken, I think that brings us on to a question which I think that Greg was alluding to, which is, obviously there needs more resource on the pond to actually do that in an average year. And you're saying it needs more manpower. And I think one of the questions I'm feeling is coming from Greg and some of the others is that, if they wanted to help out financially or something or pay for something, what would that entail? They would say, can you do in front of my house if we use the small harvester? Could we do that? How much would it cost? Sort of thing. Can you give us a feel for that?
You could. The only catch is that it's the manpower limitation. They just didn't have the bodies to put on it. A couple of years ago, we set up a provision to bring in an outside contractor to cover areas that we didn't think we could get to. It's just like for a week because the harvester was down again and we were waiting for parts. That's expensive. If you brought somebody in from outside, you're looking at multiple thousands of dollars of mobilization cost, and then something like $1,500 a day. Now they could do multiple properties in a day. I would say you could do almost like an acre to 2 acres in a day. So it's not cost prohibitive. Having another person available within Parks or DPW to go out and run the harvester when we have 2 harvesters does make sense. We just physically don't have those people. Again, they were down, I think it was 5 staff positions this summer. They couldn't hire interns. And COVID-19, I mean, when the guy's out on the harvester, it's fine. He's not exposed to anybody. It's a good arrangement. The problem is he's got to get to work. He's got to check in. He's got to get equipment. He's got to take the load to the dump. There's so many other things. And again, the problem, as soon as we get a storm or something goes down or they got a problem, if they need somebody, this is where it comes from. Particularly if somebody mechanical, because all these guys have skills for repairs and stuff.
I think you've also alluded in the past when we discussed it, is that also it's very hard to get this sort of resource for a short, limited period of time.
Yeah, their
But,
scheduling is hard. The other limitation
yeah.
everybody's got to keep in mind is they can't operate in really shallow water. We had a couple complaints from up at Pickle Road that, you know, there was open water they could see, but they couldn't get to it. And I went up and looked, they're absolutely right. You had 30, 35 of super dense fanwort growing there. And the end of it was in 5 foot of water. So yeah, they could have cut a little bit more in there, but not too much. And they're always run the risk when they cut near the bottom of hitting something, damaging the blades, and now nobody's getting cut. So they try to stay away from that if they can help it. The smaller harvester could have cut some perpendicular trails in to get as close as we could for people, when anybody to run it. And that was also down for a time.
Yeah. And the hydro raking, how far out does that go? That's got a depth limit on it as well, hasn't it, the other way?
Targeted to do in the shallow area to dig this out and minimize it. It works well for water lilies and some of the other heavier rooted plants. Unfortunately, doing that will actually encourage the fanwort and the milfoil to move in because their fragments just drop and reroot there. So it doesn't work horribly well for controlling those plants.
Okay.
May I ask an out-of-the-box question?
Sure, Tom.
Does the Wellesley College Pond have the same town permitting? And I know the operators have to be skilled and certified. Is there any way that we could, if they're not utilized and they have free time, get a few days from those folks to help us?
I'll have to lean to Brendan. Be honest, I have no idea what they do on Wobbin. I don't know what they do at all there. Is there harvesting?
Yeah.
There is?
I think so. I thought I saw a harvester over there.
They may hire it on a temporary basis, as we were discussing. I don't think they have a day, every day harvesting program like Wellesley does. It's something we can explore. I think, as Ken's alluded to, I mean, even if there was some kind of slush fund to pay for overtime, it's not a guarantee. I mean, it's not something that I think, unless a new position was created, you have a guarantee that people are going to take up on that and how to fund that. So it's a great question. And I don't, my sense is that they do not have an ongoing harvesting program, and maybe they just contract it out per job for a small area. But I can definitely look into that. It's a good suggestion.
Because if they have a skilled operator or and they rent the equipment or whatever they do, maybe there's just, I'm just trying to think of things out of the box that we might be able to.
I'm not aware of any skilled operator over there. I think that it probably is a contracted service. And we did try that ourselves, because we knew we were going to have problems meeting the goals. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3.
And what's the condition of our conveyors? Because we can harvest it, but can we convey it?
It broke down 3 times this year. One time they got it going after a day. Another time it was down, actually it was the last day of June, and they got it going the next day. So twice they got it going within a day. One time it took 3 days.
That's the blue conveyor, right? We have another one for the small.
They've swapped them out when they've needed to. I am not sure of the status of the other one right now, but yes. The blue one is the one that's supposed to be used.
Okay.
The bigger one, the better capacity, the newer one.
This is can I ask you a question? This is John Cholfie. I think I live near Cove 2, Pickle Road. Can you hear me?
Yes. We can get rid of the screen thing now if you want.
So I was wondering about, see, there's a picture of my background with a pile of weeds that I pulled out at lunchtime today.
Nice.
by shore. So I pulled out, I don't know, 27 wheelbarrows like that, and it works. Every couple of weeks they come back with vengeance. What I was wondering is I've hydro raked, I think 3 times for a total of 10 hours. And it pulls out significant volumes of, I don't know what the scientific term for muck is, but
Yep.
it really stinks. So I assume that that's because it's anaerobic bacteria, making sewer-like smell.
Yes.
And so to me, I think the hydro raking is a good idea. And last time I talked to the operator who was doing it, he said, you have so much muck here that you should get a bobcat with an 8-foot bucket and a landscaper guy who take it away. And I could spend a couple days here and pull out a lot of this, and you'll have less of the smelly water, at least near the shoreline. I'm kind of very interested in doing that. I know it'll be kind of expensive, but I'm wondering what our plans. Is the town going to get the hydro rake? Would I be able to do that on the permit and so forth? And I think some of the other neighbors are interested in doing this.
Well, with the advent of the use of benthic barriers at the public beach to control the plants, and of course this year they didn't make a very big swim area, so they didn't even have to do that. They've stopped having hydro raking done at the beach. That was where the town would pay for the mobilization cost to bring it in and for their part, and then residents could sign up for some hours of service and have the hydro rake work there. I share your enthusiasm for it because it is basically unpermitted dredging. You can get the muck and stuff out as well. We don't talk about that too much in professional circles because technically you need a whole nother set of permits to remove that material. But everybody kind of looks the other way on that one, and that's fine. But if you really wanted to remove...
Before anybody says anything too damning, remember I am the chair of the Wetlands Protection Committee.
Yes.
Cover your ears.
At the state level, we don't have a problem
We'll
with it.
talk theoretically, shall we?
No, the point is, at the state level, they acknowledge that this is a tiny amount of material. It's not enough to get excited about. I think regulatory limit is 100 cubic yards. Now, if everybody around the lake wanted to get hydro raked and pull out that muck, you'd be over 100 cubic yards and you would need those permits. For you to come in and have somebody take out 10 or 15 yards, well, you're working in a wetland, you need a permit. You might be able to get through it with just the town permission and DEP oversight, but the people that handle dredging permits at the state level are nuts about this stuff, and they will put you through the ringer. You will spend probably double-digit thousands of dollars on testing and planning before you're allowed to do it. This is why we don't have many discussions of dredging. The dredging of the 2 to 3 acres in Area 1 north of the islands, we dredged that 13 foot deep, so it's a pretty good hole. It was, I believe, 13,000 cubic yards, 12,800 yards. That cost over $800,000. So when you say it's expensive, that's with a capital E.
Sure. No, but it was the hydro rake setup that we had before, a day of hydro raking and then have it carried away. We're not talking the volume that, you did in that.
Well, if just you did it, yes. But if 20 of your neighbors did it, you're over the 100 yards.
I see. Yeah, I don't think we've ever come anywhere near 100 yards because we've all done a few hours each. So.
I don't know. I've never measured it.
Yeah.
So that
I know in
theory,
4 hours, it's only handfuls of yards. They're not doing tons.
Again, I can't say that's not true. I just can't say that it is. I have no measurements. If you pull material out other than the plants, roots, and what incidental stuff comes with them, you're dredging.
Sure, no, I'd just point out, I guess it's either milfoil or fanwort. I don't know which one. They look the same to me. They're both pretty ugly looking. So
the fanwort leaves are palmate. It's like branching out like a hand. On the milfoil, the leaves are feathery. It's like a feather with usually 4 of them in a rosette around it. But
okay, this is probably all milfoil then. It's all the same. One species.
I have no problem with hydro raking whatsoever. It's just that when you start removing any kind of quantity material that will make a difference, you're into another level of permitting.
Yeah, and John, to answer your question, John, in the past, hydro raking has been arranged by the abutters. I'm happy to help facilitate that. I know the town has helped facilitate that where they've advertised it, but that's taken on by the neighbors is my understanding.
Sure, yeah, I'm somewhat aware of it. I didn't do the arrangement, someone else did it, but the town got the permit and got the machine here. And it sounds like that's not going to happen next year.
Well,
Impetus for the town to do it, that's true. Doesn't mean it couldn't be done.
Yeah. So the neighbors would have to pick up the cost of transporting the machine here too, and so forth. Even if the town,
I mean, that's been the situation in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, that part of their cost to do the properties is mobilization, and obviously there's an economy of scale where more people can spread that cost out. And I think just recently, I don't know when the last time it happened, but yeah, there just hasn't been kind of wide interest. And if it's because we didn't help spread the word, then we can do better with that. But I think the whole setup was arranged by
it was arranged through us, actually, Brandon. And the last couple of years, he just never hit the number of people to make it.
Yeah, it's been about
viable.
4 years because we got a permit that expired last year, and the last 2 years of it, nothing was done other than the work at the beach. And some of that wasn't even hydro raking to remove plants; it was to regrade the beach to make it safer, the swim area.
Well, if we assume the town doesn't hydro rake the beach area, how much did the town spend for permitting and because it would be assumed by us on Pickerel Road, John, and what is the cost of that?
Probably about $3,000. Now, I have no objection to this being a function of the pond manager under the budget I have if there's enough money, and there often is, but that's a town decision. I don't decide what I'm going to do. They direct me.
Because, I mean, I'm really, keen on John's idea personally. I just had a total shoulder replacement this morning, and I'm not going to be weeding.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad thing to do. I wouldn't mean to demean it as a technique. It's just, it won't prevent the stuff from regrowing the milfoil, the fanwort, the way it stops water lilies and certain other plants. And the problems we had this year were almost entirely fanwort and milfoil.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Another question, looking longer term, would it be possible? There different, like when the Northern Cove was dredged, they dredged really deep below the muck. They took out sand and everything, right?
Yes.
There's got to be 4 to 6 feet of muck in our cove. I've kind of poked a pipe in and seen it. So that looks like about what it is. And I know when the guy scoops up the muck, it's only muck, it's decaying plants with, oily looking substance in it. And, I was wondering if we could just dredge the muck out only, if that's a different zoning or permitting process, and what that would look like from a cost. Would it be as expensive as the Northern Cove dredge?
No, it's actually more expensive. Taking the sand out was the cheaper part of it. Less disposal cost. Katie was.
Yeah, can I, Katie, ask a question, please?
You have to unmute yourself.
You're on mute, Katie.
Mute. Katie, you're muted.
You have to click in the upper right corner.
Is that better?
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I just had a question because of my ignorance about this, but I really couldn't follow what you were talking about in terms of the negative aspects of the hydro waking, in terms of the plants that are cut up, I guess, and then they reroot. And so does it mean that if you do it, that it's sort of a useless project in terms of if there's going to be a regrowth of the milfoil and the fanwort anyway within that year? I'm a little confused.
It's a shorter term benefit per unit of cost than you get from a lot of other things. Think of like rototilling your garden. you know, it sets it up, but something's going to grow there. Maybe not right away, but something's going to grow back in there. And if you don't determine what's growing by planting the things you want, the weeds come in. If it happens to be a problem with water lilies, which have big, thick root stocks that they depend on, and you tear them out with hydro raking, it could be 5 years before you have an issue again, maybe longer. But with something like milfoil and fanwort, you tear this stuff out, you don't actually get all the roots, things break off, and stuff will regrow, not right away, probably not even that year, but the next year for sure.
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand better. Thank you.
Yeah. Something to think about that we've had permits for before and actually can be given an exemption by the Conservation Commission if they want, is the use of benthic barriers, which is what they're using in the beach area now. You literally lay this stuff down and it gives you a plant-free zone to get out into the open water part of the lake. That has some real merit here. It takes some effort to put in. It does require some maintenance, but there's a type now that's available that we use at the beach that I'm pretty happy with. It's not terribly expensive and it works really well. Something to think about.
Ken,
Before anybody else speaks, I've got a question for somebody else. Thomas has had a lot of time. Sharon Beckman is asking Ken, what amount of money would the town need to budget per year in order for you to have a successful weed harvesting operation?
Right now, I want to say they budget something in excess of $50,000, but I'm not exactly sure. Brandon, do you know the number?
So it's closer to 70 for harvesting.
Okay. So at a guess, I'd say closer to 100,000. But again, you have to have the people to actually do it.
Yeah, that seems to be part of the problem.
And I just want to so we can throw money at this problem, but the day that new machine could come in, and if someone runs it aground, it's down until they can fix it. If a unknown part falls off, it's down. So, you know, the new machine isn't a fix. It's really difficult to say how do you ensure a successful harvesting program, because the boat, even in its most pristine condition, when we hired a firm, they came out and I think that machine broke down within 3 days. So I think that's a really tricky question to answer.
Okay. Brendan, I think as you're there, and I think now we've got Ken here. Ken's mentioned the benthic barriers as probably the most cost-effective way of dealing with shoreline weeds. That, you know, I've also had a question about that from I don't know who sent it to me. I think there is an issue with permitting with benthic barriers, but again, that might be something that, you know, I think that's one of the things that is coming from people in the Friends of Morses Pond is how to deal with the weed situation close in.
Yeah. The recommendation from DEP is that if you are covering less than 10% of the littoral zone, the area that can grow plants, which is 35, 40 acres of Morses Pond, it's okay for the commission to give them a negative determination of applicability, which means you don't have to go through the full permit process. Much easier. Does not mean they have to give it to you, but they can. And then the residents would be allowed to do this, to answer Deed's question. You just go out and do it. You have to have approval. But once that approval was gained, we could map out all the spots that would be likely, order the stuff, and it could be put down. It's not hard to do.
I saw, you know, years ago on the benthic barrier, I saw them putting it in, demoed at the beach, and I just couldn't imagine doing
different stuff than what was demoed then. Different stuff.
Yeah, but they were talking about putting cinder blocks on the benthic barrier.
So I'm telling you, it's different stuff now.
Okay, because putting that on
current
top
version, if you want to look it up online, it's called Lake Bottom Blanket, and it's a thin film material that I thought was trash until I used it. It's phenomenal. You can cut it, you can't tear it. Every 5 feet, it has a sleeve sewed in where you slip a piece of rebar, and then a tie wrap that keeps the rebar in there. Fold it up like an accordion, and you simply pull it out from shore if you're trying to make an open area, open water zone. It's 10 foot wide. Pull it out, 50 feet, whatever you need, drop it down. You've got an open water area. It has slits in it to let gas out. It has a light side and a dark side. The dark side makes it very hard to see at all. The light side means you can find your keys and your rings. We use it in the beach area. It's a little more complicated there because we're not pulling it from shore. We're laying it along the bottom of the slope where the docks normally go. So then it requires divers because we're in deeper water and we're making multiple panels where we're overlaying them 6 inches and all that. It's more complicated. But for somebody to buy a 10 by 50 piece, that would be about $300, $350. It's got to be good for at least 10. So $400 with the rebar, pretty easy. Tom's not going to be able to lay it out with his shoulder, but we could get a bunch of people that could do it.
I see.
True that.
Yeah, because putting it on top of muck, it'll just sink.
When John was mentioning the muck, few of us got in the water to pull out, limbs and twigs, that kind of stuff that was blocking flow next to the bridge on Pickerel. And I literally was up to here in muck.
Yep. Oh, it's mucky, no question. Oh,
and I'm wondering about microbes. Is that a way we can accelerate the decomposition of the muck? Is there?
That's a good question. Okay, if money and permits were no object, I would certainly recommend we do some more dredging work in Morses Pond. But money and permits are always an issue, and they're big issues. To do it the other way around, say we'll put something in that helps chew up the muck. I've actually done experiments with that. You cannot believe everything you read online. Big surprise. You actually don't get less volume of muck. You just get lighter muck that resuspends in the wind more easily. I've done it and as both a lab trial and in a cove of a lake in Connecticut, and it doesn't do what they say it does. The enzymes they're putting in do chew up organic matter, but you don't wind up with a denser layer of stuff laying thinner on the bottom. You have a more flocculent layer of really loose stuff, and the first windstorm can resuspend it. They often do it with aerators, and they claim the ester oxygen is helping decay the stuff, and there might be some truth to that. What they're really doing is help resuspend it so it goes somewhere else, and now you have a clearer bottom there. Bacterial products can work. They are a really weird area under the law where they're not considered an algicide, they're not considered a hazardous waste product in terms of dealing with hazardous waste. So they fall between the cracks, but the guys that make them keep all the ingredients proprietary because they're deathly afraid they're going to get put into a regulatory process where they have to get licensed or certified for these projects, and it's millions of dollars under the EPA program. So, for example, there's a guy in California that does a lot of this, who's very honest and upfront. So if you're trying to kill algae, you put an algicide in to kill the algae. You put in enzymes that break down the long chain hydrocarbons. You put in bacteria that consume the other hydrocarbons, and you put a settling agent in to settle them out, and you have clear water. No bacterial product by itself does all four. Mostly what you're being sold is enzymes that act like an algicide by eating away the cell walls of the algae. So you're an unregistered algicide. If that ever came out as such, it's not legal. So these guys don't make any algicidal claims, but that doesn't mean that's not what they're doing. Muck, it's the same deal. You're chewing this stuff up. Where do the contaminants go? They have to go back in the water. If the stuff's going somewhere, it isn't staying in the muck. You're putting stuff back up in the water. What are we putting there? Don't know. It's never been measured. So I can't tell you they don't work. I've seen them work several places, but I can't recommend it as a professional because I can't tell you what we're really doing.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Ken. There's a couple of questions on the chat. One is, I think it relates to the last question, is does the benthic shield actually work when you've got a lot of muck? And the second one is, would a late season cut suppress the regrowth in the following season?
Okay, take the second question first, because that question was asked to me literally earlier this week by Paul DePhillips, who's the current overall manager for that out of Parks and Tree. And the answer, unfortunately, is no, because most of these weeds die back on their own in the fall and then come back from root crowns, sometimes stems or seeds in the spring. The cutting we would do in the fall is just getting rid of the biomass that would wind up dying and laying on the bottom. It's a good thing, it's less muck, but it's a lot of effort and it would not change what grows the next year. The benthic stuff, in fact, the benthic barriers or bottom barriers are effective on muck. They'll certainly keep stuff from growing there because they're solid. You can also at least swim over them. In many cases, you can walk on them without it puncturing or doing anything. I think a heavy amount of foot traffic would be a problem, but it does separate the muck from the overlying water, and you wouldn't get resuspension if you were swimming over it or boating over it. So yeah, it's pretty effective.
So Ken, you know, for the people who are on the panel today, would you say that like the benthic barriers would probably be the best solution for them to reach open water?
For people along the edge who can't get harvested to the edge but have dense plants going out, if you have water lilies, yellow or white, and maybe a few other things that grow emergent at the edge, the hydro raking is a pretty good idea, particularly if the town's already got them in to do something else, which used to be the case. Otherwise, yeah, I would go with the benthic barrier because it'll even get rid of the water lilies and such eventually, but you're gonna have to crush them down, which it will do itself. It just takes time. Yeah, it's not bad. Again, it's not that it's not labor intensive. Laying out a 10 by 50 piece isn't that hard, but you should pull it in, we think every 2 years. They'll tell you every year, but we did fine with 2 years worth in the beach. And right now it's out. We didn't put it in this year. If we put it in next year, we're going to leave it for 2 years. And eventually stuff gets on the top of it and you have to pull it out. It comes with a rope and a buoy, which you don't necessarily have to have up to the top. But we just found we could hook it and pull it. And again, at that size, a couple people can pull it out. I mean, it's what we made teenagers for.
Based with the benthic barrier or manually pulling like I've been doing with just the rake, which one would you say is better to do?
I like the benthic barrier because now you don't have the muck per se that can be stirred up. You're covering it. Raking is fine. If you can rake all the way down to sand and get the muck out and nobody's claiming you're dredging, you're fine.
Yeah, pulling that muck out would take a little bit.
It's a lot of work, and you can't go 50 feet out, whereas the barrier, you could make it shorter. You can get a 30-foot piece, but something between 30 and 50 foot is very manageable, 10-foot
Okay.
wide.
All right, thank you.
Would the beach, the lake bottom blanket interfere with the harvester? Is that a complication?
No, because well, first off, I wouldn't be using it where the harvester was working. You're going to use it in the shallower zones, but also the harvester doesn't cut right at the bottom. They try to stay off the bottom so they don't hit anything. Mm-hmm. So it should not be an issue.
I have a quick question, Steed.
Yeah, hi, Dave.
Hi. So a couple of things. One is there some guidance that can be provided to the neighbors? Because I do think people who live and reside on Morses Pond are very interested in accessing the pond, and the weeds do provide some barrier for that. So that's one question. The other question is related to one of the islands had a fire on it this summer. And I guess that's not an uncommon occurrence because kids will populate the island, set a fire. This one looked like it could have destroyed the trees on the island, and neighbors were pretty effective at putting it out. And the police department, the fire department did respond. But because they went by our house, I did recognize that they got caught in weeds and they had to, get the weeds out of the motor and whatever. And they did that a couple of times. We could hear them grumbling and, complaining about that. So I'm just wondering if it's an opportunity to put more attention on the weeds, because I do think the people who are on Pickerel after the bridge are completely dependent on the fire department to respond by water. And if there's any events, fire events on those islands, they also have to respond by water. So I just want to throw that out there.
It's a good point.
Brandon, you had a point so you're going to make?
Yeah, just unrelated. So I wanted to wait, but I had a question directed to me directly, asking for an update about Pine Point. So I gave a brief overview at the beginning with the erosion project, some of the progress that has been done, some areas that need to be looked at again. Pine Point was one site that was left out of the initial effort by the Public Works Department because of the scope, because of the slope. So ultimately that will likely have to be contracted out. It is still very much in the plans, but it's been permitted. We could issue a proposal or issue a request for proposals on that, and hope to do that. If not this fiscal year, I think we have one more year on the wetlands permit before we'd have to renew it. But the update is that we have plans, they are approved plans. We just don't have a contractor, we don't have a contract to do that work.
Thanks, Brandon. So back to the benthic blankets.
Sorry, Richard?
Yeah?
Oh, this is Erin Riley. I'm the person that asked about the Pine Point, and I don't know how often people get out there to look at it, but I'm just concerned that maybe it needs some short-term something, because with we get like no rain, so it completely dries out, and then we get the deluge, and the root structures are even more exposed, and there's like this big gully now, and I'm really concerned about like a major collapse. So maybe someone could go out and have a look and just see if there's something more temporary that could be done to, stitch in time saves 9 kind of thing. Thank you.
It is bad. I've seen it every time I'm out mapping the plants, and it is a bad area.
I probably, Brandon, it's maybe something where we get somebody to put down some hessian or something, that what they've used on the stabilizer slopes, and just get them to stabilize it.
Temporary cover of some kind.
Raw wattle?
Yeah, well, they need that, but they actually do. There's like a it's sort of a coconut fiber matting they can put over it, and then that it allows stuff to grow through. And I think they'll probably use it when they do the final work, anyways. But that would help sort of stabilize it, particularly as we now get into winter as well. So it's just going to accelerate. So, I think that's probably like half-day job rather than a big job to do that.
Yeah, and sorry, I'll just I'll shut up after this, but this is a thank you, because the reason I'm very familiar with Pine Point is I've been swimming from there a lot this summer, and I know I have a different perspective because I lived here since 2001, and when it was like it was just abominable. Like it was, anyway, beyond words. So to me, its existing condition is pristine and fabulous, and I have very much enjoyed. I mean, I have a tolerance for weeds, but there's a lot of activity there this summer because the beach had restrictions, and so kudos to the town for making it a place that people could go and cool off and etc. So thank you for that.
Great. Yeah. So let's say that back to the benthic blankets. There does seem to be some interest from people. What I would suggest is, if you're thinking along going those lines, then if you want to email me, send me your name. I will work with Ken and Brandon and work out how we should approach this. But I think there's probably going to need from what I was hearing about fire access, there may be town land involved, and certainly some NRC properties will be involved. So we need to get our heads together about how to permit this for people and tell them what they can do and what they can use. So, but first of all, I do need to know who's actually interested in putting down a benthic blanket, and then we can start to move it forward and perhaps get something in place for next year.
And the ones that have not been installed, well, the ones for the beach that are currently not installed are rolled up in the beach building over there. So if we wanted to look at something like this in the spring before we installed it there, you could see what it looks like and how it's used and everything else, so people would get an idea.
We're getting to the near the end of the time, but there was one question about raking out lots of snails. Are they harmful? I don't think so, but I'll pass it over to Ken.
There's different types of snails in the lake. I think you're talking about the fairly big ones. Those are actually invasive species. I mean, I'm not sure that they really qualify as invasive because the definition is supposed to include doing some sort of economic or ecological harm, and I'm not sure they're all that harmful. But there's enough of them that I don't think anybody raking out an area is putting a dent in the population. I don't think that's a problem.
Okay, well, I think we're sort of coming to the end of the questions. If there's any more burning questions, Thomas has got a burning question.
Actually, two questions.
Burning two questions.
If we were to colonize more freshwater oysters, would that help with treating the water?
Couldn't catch the first part of it. Freshwater or something?
Oysters.
Oh, oysters. Well, okay. Freshwater mussels is what we're really talking about. The family Unionids. Yeah. Unionids do clear the water column by filtering. So they are helpful overall. You have some in the lake. It's just not an extreme population. Part of the problem is that your pH goes up and down, and they don't like the lower pHs. Another aspect is they need fish as hosts for an intermediate stage, although I think you have plenty of fish. You're in good shape there. The biggest problem has been that they can't filter algae that float really well. And unfortunately, the cyanobacteria, the real problem ones, are strong floaters. So they say when you have a mussel population that's substantial and you have a lot of nutrients, it pushes you towards blue-green algae.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like one of those unintended consequences. Now, we've kept the nutrients down enough that we're not having serious problems. Because we haven't had many storms lately. If we get a couple more, you might see some issues going into the next month. Of course, hardly anybody's swimming now or out there, so it won't be as obvious, but it has happened before that stuff has popped up in the fall. I don't know that mussels would help us immensely. A big mussel population is often a sign, though, of a pretty healthy lake, so that part is positive. I don't think they're the answer to a major problem, though.
And the problem really with the lake is that we have too much stuff coming in the way of nutrients. You know,
it's a big watershed. I will say I see differences over time. The removal of phosphates from fertilizer has been a big deal. The town's ordinance about not watering lawns to the point where the runoff goes down the street is helpful. A lot of things have been done right here, and I do see improvement. But the bottom line is once you have a watershed that's more than about 30% developed, you're guaranteed incoming water quality issues. Well, you guys are about 75% developed. So there's no way we can make your watershed behave as though it's a forested area. You know, the difference between the picture behind Brandon and the picture behind me. I cannot make Morses Pond look like the picture behind me. It's just not realistic. There are things we can do to improve it. There's things we can do to manage it, and we do them. And other than some real issues with harvesting in recent years, I think we've done a decent job.
We're having this.
There are limits.
My perspective, guys, is Brandon and Ken and crew is working. You're doing as well as we can. And I cheer that on. And I just have one out of the box idea because my pain meds are really raging right now.
Sometimes this is the best ideas.
Yeah, lauded. So what about a northerly conveyor, say on the eastern part of the aqueduct? Is that feasible? So we get 3 trips.
Well, this has been talked about, the idea of having a place other than down south of the beach where the place could be offloaded would improve efficiency. Back when Steve Fader was town engineer, they tried to do that and nobody wanted it anywhere near them. going up on the aqueduct, there's some logic to that. The problem is it's a pretty steep incline. You need probably 2 conveyors to make it. And when it gets up there, there has to be a truck to take it away with serious weight. I'm not sure that's allowable up there.
I think it's 16 feet down by Pickle Point, but it's around 8 or 6 at the eastern edge. And
Okay. Well, it's just that you've got to have a place to put the conveyor. The typical conveyor now is probably going up 10 feet and dropping into the hopper. So you may need a shorter hopper or a longer conveyor. I don't know that they don't make them. It's not out of the question, but I know the stuff was reviewed in the past, and the biggest problem was having a staging area anywhere around the residences was not acceptable to the residents.
Okay. I mean,
I am concerned about the efficiency, because when we set this whole program up 13 years ago, the whole idea was to minimize the amount of time they were spending riding back and forth on the water and to maximize the weight being at any one time. Right now, and I didn't show that graphic, I guess, but the percentage of time spent on non-cutting tasks was at 36%. That's marginally okay. We've been as bad as 57%. I'd like to see it less than 25%. But the bigger issue right now is that we can't carry a full load in that harvester. So we're wasting time going back and forth with smaller loads. Yeah. So we need to restore our harvester capacity. Probably that's the #1 need.
I was thinking, you might be able to run it up and put it in one of those large containers that carry away construction debris, metal.
That's what they use at the other end. They call it a rollaway. Yeah.
And then
this year they've been using a truck with it already mounted on it and taking it every day. They were able to devote a truck to it, which I was impressed by. Usually the rollaway sat there and had to be pulled up onto a bed of the truck. But I don't know that you have the elevation, the elevation gradient may be too much. It's not that it shouldn't be looked at.
But a truck would give you another 48 inches, or at least 36 inches. You have to go up if there was something put over there, even temporary. I don't know. I'm just stoned.
I'd have to look at it. That eastern end is right where the homes start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe if it wasn't very much on the eastern end, I'm thinking the residents might like the fact that they get area 4 cleaned up a little better. I don't
just looking at it. I just know it hasn't worked in the past.
Yeah.
I know I talked to neighbors here on Pickerel Road, and it was dead on arrival here.
Right. Because that was an idea you had there that was pretty good, but I figured it was going to be a problem.
They didn't shoot me.
Yeah.
That's not how you're shot that way, is it?
No.
Fights are breaking out on Pickle Road. Okay, I think we're sort of running to the end. So action points, as far as I can see, is the support for the new harvester, because quite clearly it's going to just keep getting tougher with the equipment we have, because it just basically can't work as hard as it could. And the other side is, if you want to look into a benthic blanket, is to email me. And if there's some interest, then we'll try and get something moving so that you can get something in place.
And I would ask Richard, you and Brandon, if there is interest from town to do weed harvesting or weed hydro raking.
Yeah.
Please let me know.
Yeah, the hydro raking, if we see if there's an opportunity to get it here, we'd like to know.
Yeah.
Well, again, if that be, this separate email, but if I say what's happened in the past, we just haven't had enough people interested, and that's when it's been subsidized. So when you actually start adding in the other costs, it gets horrifically expensive.
Sure. Like, I guess if the town's going to do it, I'm definitely interested. But if I had to pick up an extra 3,000, I'm not sure I'm interested.
Yeah, my sense is that if there's enough interest from a group of people, that the town, and again, I would have to ask my board, but we could find some way to partner with the residents to at least make the permitting happen. And but I think it was always in tandem with hydro raking being performed by the town or at their for the town. So without that need, then I think it just comes down to permitting, and I think we could probably find a way to make that work.
That's terrific. I'd like
I've
to
done it twice, and
put in
two
the
of my
barrier.
neighbors want to do it now. So there is interest, I hope.
Yeah, but it comes back down to what Brandon just said, is that if you do it on your own, there's also a permitting issue, because you need to be permitted through wetlands. Whereas if the town's involved, then it can get covered. In the past, it's been swept into the town's permit. So this is what's really important to firstly let me know who's interested, because then I can gauge the amount of interest, and then I can talk to Brandon and NRC to see whether they can get the town involved, and if we can find ways forward. But unless people really there's enough interest, then it can't go forward. There's got to be significant interest in it.
Great. To you, Richard and Brandon, and particularly Ken, you guys have been very responsive. The great presentation. Love to download it, study it, and try and be of whatever help I can. And my neighbors, I know, have said the same to me.
Okay, well,
ditto. Ken and Brandon and Richard, thank you for all that you do. I've seen a lot of ponds go south and disappear, and it's fantastic that we're working hard to keep this one healthy. I think it's wonderful. So thank you.
Good.
Welcome.
Well, I think the important thing is that it's a town pond, and I think the thing is to spread the message to everybody else in the town, not necessarily on the pond.
Right.
That it takes the town to look after it, not the people just around it. It's their resource as well. And quite honestly, the people who live around the pond can't really afford to look after it the way it needs to be looked after. It has to be a town function. And so we have to tell the town that it's that important.
To that point, I think we should try to capitalize on the disadvantage of COVID having happened, that I can't tell you the number of people that have said to me, I never knew this was here. I've lived here 15 years and I've never been over here before, and da da da. So it's definitely more of a town resource this year more than any other. So we might try to do some outreach around that.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is recorded. So what I'll do is I'll post it, and I'll also send a copy to Raina and Brandon so they can post it on their sites as well, so more people get involved, and say, please link other people to this as well, because the more people are interested, the merrier. So thank you for Brandon, thank you for Ken particularly for the overview. Really appreciate it. Good science, and hope to see you all around and on the pond. So thank you so much for attending, and see you around.
Okay.
Ciao. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.